Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us. Jenna here. At Million Marker, we find that many of our users are exposed to BPA through their food choices. And BPA can leach into our food from packaging, can lining, food wraps, and much more. And while it's dangerous, BPA isn't the only cause of concern when it comes to food. And increasing research have shown that glyphosate, which is the herbicide used in Roundup, is linked to many life-threatening health conditions. That's why we're today really glad to be joined by J Gulinello of Perpetual Health Co. Today. So Jay is a clinical nutritionist and a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. His Instagram at Perpetual Health Co. has a ton of informative information about glyphosate, so definitely check it out. And
Thank you so much for joining us. Had a little bit of awkward silence. I joined early, but I'm so glad you're able to join.
Yeah, figuring out Instagram is going to have to be on the list of things to do very soon.
Right, exactly. So tell us a little bit. I gave it a little bit background, but tell us a bit about your background in your own ways, and then what made you become a clinical functional nutritional therapy practitioner.
Yeah. So my whole career actually started in the arts. So it was in music and acting, which is kind of a strange way to get where we are now. But I moved to New York and I needed a way to be able to make money. And so I started as a personal trainer and quickly realized I couldn't get the results for my clients that I wanted without having a better understanding of nutrition. So that sent me to the Nutritional Therapy Association. I found out I kind of fell in love with nutrition and how things worked. And I went on to finish my master's in clinical nutrition. And, here we are sitting here today having a conversation about glyphosate.
That's very cool. Because before this Instagram live, and I was checking out your website, and I realized, oh my goodness, you have a background in the arts. It's so amazing, and then it's so interesting how you landed on nutrition.
I think that I tell people a lot of times, it's not that I'm special and that I was able to learn anything that anybody else couldn't learn, but I think what makes me unique is the approach is a more creative approach because I come from a creative field. So I tend to think outside the box. I tend to look for answers outside the box, and I think that's what makes me, sort of a little bit unique in this field. Where a lot of people went through all science, I didn't go through any science when I arrived. It was sort of, I actually did pretty poorly in science in high school, so it's never too late.
That's awesome. So you studied at the Nutritional Therapy Association, and you credited them for helping you really look at the bio individuality for all people. So what does that mean to you?
Oh, I think it's just that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach, especially when it comes to medicine and nutrition. I wouldn't give the same advice to somebody that is suffering from type 2 diabetes and has a BMI of 43. I wouldn't give that same advice to someone who was a premier athlete looking to enhance performance, right? So and that's an overly simplistic, point of view. But when you consider the differences in humans from the composition of their microbiome to, when people ask for nutrition advice, sometimes it's funny because I have to say, I need to ask you a lot of very personal questions like, were you breastfed? Were you a vaginal birth or a cesarean section? All of these things contribute to the bioindividuality that makes the person in front of you. So I just don't think you can accurately and adequately take care of someone if you don't understand the entire holistic picture of who they are and what led them to the place that they're at looking for help.
This is actually what's lacking in traditional Western medicine today.
I could not agree more.
So, how did you become advocate for, drawing awareness to toxic chemicals in food?
So that one is a little bit more interesting. I would say that I think it was totally by accident, to be perfectly honest. I thought that when I started studying a field like science, like nutrition, I thought it was going to be pretty black and white. I thought you were learning hardcore biology, biochemistry, and there wasn't going to be a lot of argument. It was just going to be, we're going to figure this out together. We're going to follow the scientific method. we're going to arrive at a conclusion and we're going to go from there. And I quickly realized that this field, like any other field, has a lot of, let's just say, inconsistencies. I'm sure you've seen it yourself. And so I found that I think in the last couple of years, especially, I've seen a lack of, I guess I would say, oh, sorry about that. I would say a lack of accountability in terms of journalism. I would say that I was sort of led to this place because I feel like journalism is lacking just in general in the media, and somehow we have to do something about it. And I was just sort of thrust into this, again, just kind of unknowingly, just starting to post about things, and all of a sudden I realized I was broaching controversial topics, which wasn't my intention, but I just sort of ended up here.
This is awesome. But I mean, it's tiring to sort out what's the truth out there with exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and here's the thing, I have my own biases. We all have biases, but I'm very upfront about mine. So when it comes to things like glyphosate, right? This is the perfect example of, I always take the approach that if it's man-made, a man-made food, a man-made chemical, anything like that, it is always guilty first, and then it has to be proven innocent, right? Which I feel like we've almost gotten to the point now where in society it's okay to say, well, let's just make it innocent until proven guilty. We'll just put this into the food supply, or we'll just use this on crops, and we'll just kind of hope for the best. And so my bias is definitely the other way. I will tell you right away, I'm automatically going to err on the side of, this is probably dangerous. Prove to me that it's safe for people. And I just think that's the responsible approach to take, really. But I don't know. Society lately has been frightening at the amount of things that they will seem to allow into their environment without really questioning it.
Absolutely. This is also what we're thinking, also to take the precautionary approach. If we know something could potentially cause harm, then by all means, we should not use it, and we should look into it and not getting people exposed to it.
Well, I mean, how many times in history have we seen something that seemed to be, we fund things through the industry. The industry tells us that the thing that they have created and then researched is perfectly safe. And while I don't discount industry-funded research, I think you have to look at it with a very critical eye. And if you don't, I think it's buyer beware at that point.
Right. So you talked about glyphosate, and then I know you're expert now at this point on glyphosate.
I don't know if there's any such thing. That chemical is everywhere, so I don't know if anybody knows everything about it, but it's fascinating, that's for sure.
Yeah. So tell us, what is glyphosate? Why is it used?
So it's actually has a few different applications. It's the most widely used herbicide on the planet. And originally, what I find really interesting about it is that it was originally used as a descaling agent. So it's what's known as a mineral chelator. So I don't know if your audience knows what that is, but basically, in simple terms, chelation is you can think of it like a magnet. It's a magnet for minerals. Specifically, glyphosate has an affinity for what are known as +2 cations. So anything that has a +2 charge. So things like manganese, calcium, magnesium, anything like that. So that was one of its original properties. So to think that also doesn't translate from its original purpose in pipes to the soil, to the plants, and then when we ingest it in humans is a little bit silly. In fact, I found a very interesting video, right, on a chemist who was explaining to a group of farmers why potentially their glyphosate wasn't as effective on their farm as they would have liked it to have been. And what he said was, you have to check your water. He said, if you have a problem with hard water, and so hard water essentially is water that's generally known as being high in minerals like calcium, which is a +2 cation. So when glyphosate grabs onto calcium, it doesn't want to let go, right? So if you are applying glyphosate in a field that has an abundance of hard water, that glyphosate is going to attract to calcium. It's not going to let go, and therefore it's not going to be doing its job in the crops. So he was actually telling farmers how to fix their water in order to make glyphosate more effective. So he's essentially telling all of us, yes, this is going to attract minerals in your body and in everywhere, and this is the pro. This is how it's supposed to work. So I thought that was very interesting to hear it from the industry themselves, how it works. So it's not really a conspiracy theory. This is how the product was actually designed. And now they use it for a bunch of different things. They even use it on non-GMO crops to harvest early. to do things, like dry down the crops. If a frost is approaching, they can speed up the process of harvest and also make the crop cleanup easier. So it gets used on pretty much all crops with the exception of organic crops nowadays. So it's very, very difficult to avoid unless you live on another planet.
I just also find it funny when industry explain that how it's chelating these important irons, but these metals are also really important for human body. So just imagining if you get exposed to, you would lose these minerals, which is also very important for for living.
The two big ones. There was a study done in 2016. They actually did it on cows that were fed GMO and Roundup sprayed crops, and they found them to be severely deficient in both manganese and cobalt. So these are +2 cations. Cobalt, if you're aware, it's the center of the B12 molecule. So B12 deficiency, I see that a lot in people, even in non-vegetarian populations. So if you're eating a lot of glyphosate on your food, it's possible that this is chelating to cobalt. And manganese is incredibly important for antioxidant defense in the mitochondria. So you have quite a few far-ranging effects that can be seen with glyphosate, and that's just one or two examples that I just sort of randomly pulled out. But you can see how quickly that can add up to a problem when you just start talking about how much minerals impact the human body in general.
Yeah. So you mentioned it's like super widely used. So how much is it used per year? Because we've seen some stats like EWG says it's like 12.4 million pounds, and that's just on wheat alone.
So I found a really cool stat, and it's gonna be shocking, but it was since 1974. The United States has used over 1.6 billion kilograms, billion with a B, billion kilograms of glyphosate. So, and if that wasn't bad enough, you have to think of the residual time in the soil. So there were researchers went to Australia to see about how long basically glyphosate would last in the soil. And they found that after 20 years, it could still be accounted for. Almost 100% of the glyphosate applied 20 years prior was still accounted for in the soil. So we still don't really know the long-term effects environmentally, and we certainly don't know them in humans. And so what I tell people all the time is, I don't have all the answers. A lot of the studies will tell you one thing or another. But what I do have, again, is an abundance of caution with this. And we have to think of in terms of, we just because we don't know, I always tell people we don't know what we don't know. So we should be very careful as we proceed with chemicals that are this powerful. It's a very powerful chemical. There's no doubt that it works. The question is, what are the downstream side effects?
Exactly. So which food are mostly contaminated with glyphosate?
So I got a little list for you. This was a memo from the EPA. Now this was back in 2015, but I just think it was interesting because the list was so long that I only decided to pull crops that were on average 50% or more of them were sprayed with glyphosate. So this is the list of crops: almonds, soybeans, cotton, corn, figs, grapes, lemons, oranges, pistachios, sugar beets, sunflowers, and walnuts.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot of food.
That's a lot of food.
It's a lot of food, yeah. And again, that's sprayed more than 50%. I just use that as a cutoff because I didn't want to, we could go a whole half an hour with just a list of foods.
Right.
So that was just a 50%, and it was kind of staggering.
So these food then it's even more important if people are consuming a lot of these food, and then they should be choosing organic so they can avoid some of the glyphosate exposure.
Right. I mean, the problem is, organic is the great, probably the best place to start. But because we don't live in a vacuum, you could have a glyphosate, conventional field right next to an organic field, and the organic farmer is doing everything they can. But, I find the best thing you can do is actually test yourself for glyphosate. But certainly buying organic is gonna put you a step ahead of the game. And that's another interesting point. I used to be fooled by the non-GMO label, right? So the non-GMO label means, sure, the food is not genetically modified, but it does not mean that it was not sprayed with glyphosate. So it's not enough to buy non-GMO. You have to buy non-GMO. You have to buy organic as well. So that's a pretty important point.
Right. So when it comes to health, how does glyphosate impact health or impact our gut health?
So many ways. So one of the mechanisms is that it disrupts what's called the shikimate pathway, and how it's termed healthy in humans, or I should say, they say it's safe for humans, is because humans don't possess this pathway. This pathway is in plants, it's in bacteria, but what they failed, I think that's sort of a play with words, because they failed to realize that we have a microbiome, we have a lung microbiome, we have a breast microbiome, an oral microbiome, you name it. We are full of bacteria, and if those bacteria are essentially, this pathway is what synthesizes specific aromatic amino acids. So you have things like phenylalanine, you have tryptophan, and you have tyrosine. These are the three major amino acids that are synthesized in this pathway. This pathway is essentially blocked by glyphosate. So when you look at the downstream effects of, say, just these three amino acids, tryptophan is the precursor to serotonin and to melatonin. So we all know about serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter, but melatonin is critical for sleep, right? Tyrosine is a precursor to thyroid hormones. How much do we see an underfunctioning thyroid in this population right now? We have hypothyroidism is rampant. So these are the kinds of things outside of again saying that it's safe for humans because humans don't have this pathway, but it's a very nuanced topic that needs a lot of clarity, I think, to the public, and we don't have these kinds of conversations. So it's really hard for people to understand these sort of the more scientific nuance. In terms of gut disruption, it also tends to decrease lactobacillus species, which tend towards people who have low levels of lactobacillus tend towards anxiety. It also has been shown that Clostridium and Salmonella tend to be resistant to glyphosate. So what you have is this double whammy where, so you are decreasing the population of healthy bacteria, and you're increasing the population of less than healthy bacteria. So you're creating a gut dysbiosis that is problematic. And then if you want to put the cherry on top of the cake when it comes to the gut microbiome, is there are specific enzymes called cytochrome P450 enzymes, and they are very important in liver detox. But what they are also important is they're in two other things. They are critical in bile acid synthesis, and the specific CYP enzyme that is critical in bile acid synthesis has also been found to be identical to the one in the mitochondria that help convert D3 into the active form of vitamin D. So now you can understand why potentially you have a connection towards a vitamin D deficiency. And if you're not making bile acid has antimicrobial properties. It's not just for fat absorption. It's also a antimicrobial that helps clean out the small intestine. So now you can really start to see how many different ways glyphosate could potentially have a negative impact on the human body in general.
That's kind of scary.
It is. You never want to go back. Once you start to study this stuff, you become hermit. You never want to eat out. You never want to do anything. You want to grow all your own food. It becomes really problematic to have a social life.
That's funny. But we'll take it one step at a time, so not getting too overwhelmed.
Right.
They don't stop making changes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So what are other chemicals like glyphosate that are lesser known that should also be on our radar?
So one of the other ones that I have researched a bit is something called atrazine. And that is an endocrine disruptor. It's been shown in studies of frogs to actually be able to change genders. It's another problematic chemical, and it's very highly used. I've been focusing mostly on glyphosate, but I'm starting to realize that I don't want to get too myopic, because even with all the lawsuits around glyphosate, Monsanto, who's now owned by Bayer, created a new product to be used in conjunction with glyphosate called dicamba, I think is the name. And right now it's being used along with glyphosate. But at some point, if glyphosate gets such a bad reputation that they remove it from the market, you're just going to have a similar problem with something like dicamba, and we're going to have to figure out all of the negative health effects on that. So the truth is, like you said, we could run ourselves ragged getting worried about which chemicals to avoid. And the best thing to do is to just try to avoid the chemicals altogether, assume they're all guilty until proven innocent, and just switch to organic as much as you can. Use things like the clean 15 and the dirty dozen list. I use those a lot for people. Those are foods that are if you're going to buy non-organic, ones that are on the Clean 15 tend to be better, in terms of herbicides. The ones on the Dirty Dozen, I tell people, if you're not going to buy them organic, just don't buy them at all, because it's just not really worth it for you.
Right. So besides like organic, is there any other thing that we can do to limit our glyphosate exposures?
So I would say there's a couple of things. I did a little bit of research in this because I thought it was really interesting, and I found some papers that talked about 3 or 4 specific things that you could do. So one was a molecule called chlorella. It's a microalgae that actually has chelating properties. And so there's some research to suggest that it may be able to bind to glyphosate and help remove it from the body. So again, a lot of research still to be done on it, but it's a potential mechanism. Activated charcoal, sauerkraut juice is another very interesting one. And quercetin, which actually helps upregulate detoxification enzymes in the liver. So those are just a few things that we can do on top of avoidance, on top of cleaning up the foods that we purchase. And then I would say, honestly, testing yourself. You can do relatively inexpensive urine tests for glyphosate. And those are nice because then, you could run around all day trying to pinpoint the foods that you want to know whether, it could be coming on your water. Remember, it's in soil, it's in water, and it's in the air. So you may not be able to mitigate your exposure. If you live in an area where they're spraying it on your local park, you're gonna have it in the air. You're gonna be breathing it in. So I tell people, if you want to go to places like Great Plains Laboratory or just other places to get a glyphosate urine test, you can do that. Figure out what you have, and then we can try to limit the exposure, and then we can also try and get it out of your body if possible too. And there's a few other things I'm researching, but I wouldn't want to talk about them yet because I'm not sure if they have any research behind them. Not sure if they work, but lots of people tell me, have you tried this? It really works well. So we'll see. I'm open to all suggestions, that's for sure. We definitely have to do something.
Yeah, we're definitely a proponent for getting yourself tested, because without knowing that information, just very hard to pinpoint where the exposures are coming from. So people should definitely do that and then start taking actions. So as citizens then, what can we do to stop the use of these harmful chemicals, in your opinion?
So that, this is where it gets less enjoyable. I tell people, I'm not I don't love politics, but I think it's important to realize that we have to get involved. And this hits close to home, because at the end of last year, there was a bill introduced in the Senate of the state of New York, which is where I am, to eliminate all glyphosate usage on all state property. So state parks, anything that they would use glyphosate on that's owned by the state. And it was finally just signed by the governor a few months ago. So, again, glyphosate is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Again, we can't really escape it. But knowing what's going on in your local town, sometimes in small towns, small counties, small states, small provinces, you have a pretty loud voice in those areas. So you just need to be aware of what's going on. You need to be aware of what bills are available. These politicians, the one thing they respond to is, when people are loud enough and people are angry enough and they're willing to vote them out of office, they don't want to lose their cushy desk job. So if you can push politicians to acting, I think that's one of the best ways to be able to handle that. Again, outside of cleaning up your own house, your own environment, get involved with some of the local politics and see if any of those bills are pending in your local area, because there's a lot you can do.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Now, tell us about Perpetual Health Code. So
the idea of Perpetual Health is to show people, to educate people, but also to show them that ancestral health is not something that is a concept that's unattainable, right? That we live today in a way that's not necessarily in line with our biology. Our technology has outpaced our biology's ability to handle it. So the idea of perpetual health is to mimic some of the ancestral movement patterns, ancestral light exposure, ancestral foods, all of those things that gave our ancestors a life free of chronic disease. Now, sure, they were exposed to things like weather and animal attacks and things that we don't have to worry about as much. But what we've traded for that is a whole host of chronic diseases because of our processed foods, our polluted air. And so the idea of perpetual health is to show people a way to be able to live a life that's as healthy as our ancestors, while also taking advantage of all of the comforts that have made modern day living so comfortable. Like in a trauma, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else than in a place where I could go to a hospital and I could have doctors put me back together again. When it comes to understanding nutrition in the human body, I think Western medicine falls short. So that's the idea of perpetual health, is to bring people back in alignment with that sort of ancestral wisdom.
So doing so, you host these like wellness retreats in beautiful areas, because I've seen your website. So do you have any upcoming wellness retreat?
Well, I thank you for asking, Jenna. We do. In October of this year is actually going to be, this is sort of going to be unusual. Going forward, the idea is to have it in a sort of mountainous, woodsy area of the northeast of the United States, which is beautiful. So you can go out and you can go hiking and you can do, all kinds of other immersion therapy. This one is going to be on Martha's Vineyard between October 6th and October 9th. And it's going to be amazing. We have a nose to tail chef who's going to be there cooking ancestral foods. We're going to have cold therapy, sauna, red light therapy, education, movement, community, all the things that I think people have been lacking for the past 2 years, if you know what I mean. So I think in person is incredibly important, and I encourage people to check it out. If they go to perpetualhealth.co, it's right on the front page. You can check it out. We would love to have you there. The whole idea is to help us build a community. Sometimes these kinds of lifestyles can be isolating. You think, oh, nobody else is thinking about these kinds of things, or nobody else cares about, their health as much as I do. And the idea of this is to show that, there are a lot of people out there like you, and you should find your tribe, and you should let your tribe help support you and help make you healthier and help you achieve all of your health goals. So that's the idea, and I cannot wait for October. Not that I want to rush the summer, but I'm looking forward to October.
I think we got two very excited audience. What's the menu, and do you need help?
Well, I mean, as we get closer, we will be revealing the menu and whether or not we need help. But let me just tell you that the menu is going to be unlike. I can honestly say it will be unlike any other retreat you've ever been to. So you're talking nose to tail. So you're talking. But we're not just talking, liver and organ meats, all the stuff that we want people to try. We're talking raw dairy, things that are illegal in some states. So these, people will be able to actually try ancestral foods, but they'll also have some treats, things like paleo pancakes and, all kinds of other things that will keep people learning how to take these things home and maybe even be able to create them at home. A chef is really good at sharing recipes with people and letting people know how to be able to create this stuff at home. So you'll get a learning experience in the food department as well. So it's very, very cool.
It looks like we also have another fitness coach wanted to speak at your retreat.
Oh, well, I mean, hey, reach out to us and let us know. This one is going to be a little bit smaller, so we have a limited space at this one. But the idea, once the location is secured for the future, these are going to be going on a regular basis, but perhaps even monthly or weekly. So please get in touch. We would love to have people of different disciplines. My background is nutrition and physical training, but I would love to hear from people who have a whole different field of study, things that I know nothing about. And again, as much as I love to teach, I also love to learn. So please don't hesitate to reach out here or reach out and subscribe on the website.
Awesome. This is so cool. So thank you so much. So everyone be sure to check out Perpetual Health Co. Sign up for this retreat. So thank you so much, Jay, for joining us. And everyone, please be sure to follow Jay at Perpetual Health Co. And you can also learn more about Perpetual Health Co. by clicking our LinkedIn bio. We will have all the links there. So thank you so much.
Jen, it was a pleasure. I really appreciate the time. Let's do it again.
Yes. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.